Hello and welcome to Mental Health Matters with me, Dr. Audrey Tang. It's that show where we take a deep dive into all things mental health and well-being. My co-host today is Judith Crosier, and we have a very special guest joining us a little bit later. It's Rosie Miles, who set up Kaliyoga Wellness Retreats in Spain. And today's topic is running a new business. New businesses, not the sort where you're in your room kind of selling one or two things, usually to your mum, kind of. I know that sounds awful, but every business has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about when you have to hire premises, when you have to literally set up shop. Have you seen or have your friends experienced something like that where it just isn't going to plan?
Yes, I mean, I've got friends who have done similar things,
Yeah.
very enterprising friends, and I think it's difficult from the moment you start, because if you're looking for new premises, you know, that's a whole, opens up a can of worms. It can do, whether you're buying or whether you're renting, you know, what are you responsible for, what are you not responsible
Yes.
for, what can you change? From there upwards, really. So every aspect of starting a new business, especially if you haven't done it before, or it's a new arena, or if it's, say it's a hobby and you want to start your business from a hobby, and you have an idea and actually the reality is very different.
You see, that is a very interesting point to hang on to for a little
I
bit. And it'd be great to hear any comments from our viewers as well. If you have started something which was a hobby and turned it into a business, and then suddenly you stopped enjoying the hobby.
Yeah, that can happen.
Because you're doing it all the time then. And
exactly.
it's tiring. So I'm talking about, I've got a friend who makes soaps. And it's lovely.
Yeah.
And she started by making soaps for her friends and family at Christmas. And then everyone said, well, these are really good. You need to sell them. So she got them into some small shops, and that was okay. You could still produce at home. But then she got bigger orders.
Yeah.
And you haven't got the room to produce at home. But then you don't necessarily have the cash flow either to invest in the other premises. And so she was finding she was almost doing these soaps morning, noon and night whilst trying to keep another job because it wasn't
enough to sustain her.
And this is what you're saying. It's about, it was a hobby and it was a great hobby and it was lovely for friends' weddings and things, but suddenly it just went horribly wrong.
I know, and it's a shame, isn't it? Because if there's the demand for the products, like I have a friend in exactly the same situation with cakes. So there's a demand, but she doesn't have her own kitchen that's suitable to make cakes. And so she's in between. Do I invest a lot of money and hire premises, and that might be wasted, or do I carry on doing it at home and like you say, you know, morning, noon and night, really stressed out? It's a hard one.
It is. And they talk about having obsessive passion and just generally kind of normal, ordinary passion.
Yeah.
Obsessive passion is exactly what happens, and that's a psychological issue whereby you started doing something because you enjoyed it, but then it just takes over your life. And that isn't necessarily just cake making or soap making. It can be sport, it can be whatever it is that you've ended up, I guess, attaching your income to, which can be really hard. Another thing when it comes to hobbies is that I know, and it's difficult, but your friends are not going to be as invested as you are.
No, of course not.
But that's not something to take out on them.
Yeah.
I wrote a blog once about how friends are not your marketing minions. Just because they don't post something on their wall doesn't mean they don't like you any less. It just means that it's their wall and they can use it for their purposes.
Yes, and I suppose even if they are 100% behind what you're doing, they're not thinking about it 100% of the time like a business startup person might be.
Yes, exactly. And so sometimes it is helpful to have, I guess, what Napoleon Hill called that mastermind network, that group of people who get where you are, other entrepreneurs, other founders, people who understand what you're going through, and they may be more helpful perhaps than friends to talk to. That's not to say you have to remove your friends, but it is saying that you sometimes need different types of support.
Yeah, absolutely. People that have been there and done it, or are going through it at the same time, so you've got someone to bounce off maybe.
That's also true. And there's a lot more than we think that we have to go through. We've already talked about the moving from a hobby into having to do it full time. But as you're saying, it's things like hiring premises, contractors, all of that extra stuff where you you maybe don't know who to trust or where to start.
Exactly, and things like insurance that you just might not think about, but you have to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what our next guest, our guest expert, is going to be talking about. It is a real pleasure to have Rosie Miles on the show. She is a female founder and entrepreneur. She founded Kaliyoga Wellness Retreats and runs a retreat in Spain. It's absolutely beautiful. I can't wait to chat with her about the things she wished she knew, but also the things that she's going to suggest as you start your new business or move into entrepreneurship. Welcome to Mental Health Matters, Rosie.
Thank you, Dr. Audrey. Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Well, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show because you know firsthand what entrepreneurship is like, and it's not as Instagram would have you believe.
Indeed it isn't. Oh no, the grisly reality behind the scenes, very different. Yes, yes.
So let's start off with you sharing your story. How did you come to set up Kaliyoga Wellness Retreats?
Well, I guess my passion for yoga began in the late 90s when I was an actor. I was a stage actor in London.
Oh, wow.
I was doing lots of theatre in the West End, and whilst that was a lovely job, I was very stressed out because of the expectation. I used to put myself under a lot of pressure, you know, analysing each performance, like going through everything. I was a bit of a perfectionist, and I also found the audition process very difficult. It's, you know, acceptance, rejection. I just don't think I was cut out for it, really. So I decided I really needed a practice. I needed something to ground me. And I found yoga. I met this guy in a bakery, and he just looked really sort of happy. And I said, well, what's your secret? And he said, oh, I do yoga. And I went, I'm going to try that. I want some of
Wow.
that. So I went along to my first yoga class, and I sort of became hooked from the first class. It was so helpful. I could sleep again. I could, you know, I could breathe again. I noticed I wasn't even breathing properly. You know, as a lot of us, you know, do. We just don't even breathe.
Yeah.
So after that, I sort of kind of realised that, you know, acting maybe wasn't for me, and I started doing more and more yoga, and I sort of swapped Clytemnestra for the camel pose, and as one journalist put it, which made me laugh a lot, which was true. So I decided to train to be a yoga teacher, and I went to Ibiza, which is a bit of a weird choice for someone who was searching for peace. I know, a bit of a weird...
It has some beautiful, peaceful parts.
But it does
Yeah,
have a
some
peaceful
gorgeous
part.
parts.
Exactly.
With the glow stick, or
Yeah, exactly.
San Antonio.
No, it definitely wasn't San Antonio. No. So it was the quiet side of the island. And on that training course, I met my husband, Jonathan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he was a music producer in London, and he was also very stressed. And we got together, and we just fell in love instantly. It was a crazy snogging thing.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, absolutely.
that.
When we weren't doing yoga, when we weren't eating dal and drinking disgusting sort of yogi teas, we snogged a lot, which was lovely, and shared our dream of setting up a yoga retreat. So it was a shared dream. And but we didn't know anything about yoga retreats, so we didn't have any money. So we were volunteers, and we volunteered on yoga retreats around the world to do a bit of market research. Yes. And we found that there were two types of retreat. There was either the really sort of austere, get up at 5 a.m, chant 1,000 names of God, you know, do a lot of washing up, that wasn't really our bag.
Yeah.
And alternatively, then there were really, really posh retreats, which were more like hotels with a little bit of yoga, sort of, and it didn't feel very authentic. It just felt a lot of lotus flowers and people with towels, and it wasn't really.
And probably very expensive.
Really
as well.
expensive, exactly. So we thought, well, let's do something in the middle, something sort of between that, something which is warm but professional, something which has elements of luxury but is still authentic kind of thing. So then we moved to Spain, to the mainland in Andalusia in the south. We packed up our London lives, and we were really sort of like we had no money, no experience. We just had a sort of expired library card and a maxed out credit card already. And, we didn't know our arse from our elbow, really. We really didn't know what we were doing. So don't worry, everyone who's just starting out. In the beginning, you don't know anything, and you learn everything on the job, and that's the way it should be. Yeah, so we moved to this. It was a concrete bunker. It was a terrible place for a yoga retreat. I mean, it just was not... it was not...
Sounds delightful.
It was really terrible.
Yeah, definitely peaceful.
Oh my God, honestly, I think it's hopefully the pictures are showing it in its full glory now. It's incredibly beautiful, but after 22 years, of hard work.
We do have some pictures up there. That looks stunning.
Yeah, so that's
incredible.
Yeah, that's our oak and glass yogashala. It's huge and it's beautiful, and the mountain views are absolutely stunning.
And we've got
the windows,
some pictures of it in use as well. So we've got some yoga going on in there as well, which is just absolutely lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's wonderful. So we had a lot of adventures in the beginning. We really, we didn't have any Spanish. We didn't have any experience of running a business. I was an actor, he was a producer, but we had a passion, and I think that's what you were talking about before. You have a passion, and you just drive it through.
And also, as well, with being an actor and a producer between you, you must have a lot of skills that you could bring to it as well.
Absolutely, yes, definitely. We could definitely do the hosting, and my husband, he did the website, and so as I was kind of running around, kind of making it happen, I was looking at what was happening. Oh, okay, right, that's happening on the website, right? Okay, I better create the reality, So it was oh God, it was such a trip. Looking back, there was no pool. We had to dig it out ourselves. We didn't have any Spanish. We had to mime. I remember miming to our Spanish neighbour Jose, "Can I borrow your JCB?"
Oh, that was. And there's the pool.
And there's the pool in the background.
Goodness,
Yes, absolutely. Dug out with our bare hands and a JCB.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. John G drove the JCB into the pool. So. Or into the hole, I should say. Yeah, no, it was a real adventure. Yeah.
This is also why we're so thrilled to have you on the show specifically, because you are honest about it. You're raw about this. And it's also things like drinking the tasteless, horrible teas at times. Not all of wellness is as beautiful or as insta-happy as people would have you believe. And I think there is that importance of recognising authenticity in there as well. And sticking on that topic, would you mind telling us a little bit about some of the things that you needed or learned to be aware of very, very quickly, not just with contractors and the build, but perhaps with clients as well, and expectations?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I really, I've got to be honest with you, in those old days, I felt a bit sorry for our clients. because we were so intense. We were like we were so passionate about yoga. We used to offer 4-hour yoga classes, 5-hour sort of gourmet feasts every night, me with my stand-up comedy routine. I think they were all a bit sort of intimidated by how passionate we were. And we were like sort of, like demented waiters with a tray, always sort of there, can I help you? And it's so lovely to see when people from those vintage days come back, and a lot of them do. They come back because they remember, what it was like, and they obviously enjoy how it's evolved. But yes, managing expectations is huge. It really is. And when you've got a beautiful website, You know, you've really got to, but you've got to be so honest about what you're offering, you know, because people come and they, you know, they expect, and some people's, and I think we're very happy to say that now we transcend those expectations, and people are really, really thrilled with what they see. But yeah, in the old days, I think, you know, they were just sort of a little bit overwhelmed by how intense we were about it all. So, yeah, I mean, we have calmed down a lot. We still give great service, but we're not quite as mad.
Well, you learn, I suppose, what works for you and for your guests, and what maybe isn't working so well, and you adapt. And
yes, we leave them alone now. You know, we leave them alone. We let the mountain venue. We let the mountains do the job. I mean, it's so beautiful out there that it's the mountains.
The waterfall there as well.
Yes,
that's just stunning.
Mountain waterfalls that you can go and visit. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely. I mean, so. Okay, we've got less intense now, and maybe less people pleasing.
That's exactly it. And coming from an acting background, it was all about performance and feeling as if I had to entertain the guests. When in fact, they just evolve. Every group is different, when you leave people alone and trust the process and that the dynamic's going to work, and it does. Every week, people they make friends, so I felt a bit like, oh, they don't need me anymore.
What next?
And they don't know exactly what's next.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's lovely to get to that stage, and I think if anyone is worried, and Rosie, you're going to give us your top tips later on, but you will get there. You will get there. It takes work, and that's the bit we're going to explore next. But one key thing, just now as you reflect back, would you have done differently? If there is anything.
Oh gosh.
Or maybe there's more.
What one key? I would have asked for help earlier. I would have asked for help. I thought I was Superwoman and I could do everything on my own. And like a lot of women in their mid-30s, I was just so desperate to impress. I don't know who, my dad, Buddha, God, I don't know who. But I didn't ask for help, and I really burnt out. And you know, obviously, when you're starting your new business, you've got to work out everything. You've got to, you know, the cooking, the yoga, the transfers, you know, how the beds should be done. You're learning everything on the job. But if you can, get help. Because I remember one day I was cooking paella. I was pregnant with my first child, and I was cooking for the guests. And I just sort of slipped to the floor and fell asleep on the floor.
Oh, my word.
And my husband found me asleep on the floor. And he was like, what do you do? I'm so tired.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
That's proper burnout.
Yeah, so get the help you need. Delegate. Yeah, if you can.
Perfect. That's a great thing to end on for a second. Now, Rosie, you're staying with us, and we're going to learn a lot more. But we're going to take you over to our resident expert, Dr. Helen McCarthy. You met her on the show previously. She's the appetite doctor, and she's going to be giving us some of her top tips.
People say that it takes 20 minutes for your brain to know that you're full, but is that true, or is it a myth? Well, the answer is that it's partly true. Many of us overeat and then regret what we've eaten. This eat, regret, repeat cycle can take all the joy out of eating. So this video is about how to stop overeating and put the joy back into food and eating and lose weight at the same time. In this video, I'm going to explain that there are two types of fullness signal, so you can get better at listening to what's happening as you eat. Then I'll describe to you the first of these types of fullness signal, the stomach fullness, and how using that can really help us to stop overeating. Then we'll look at the second type of fullness signal, the gut fullness, and how the problem with waiting for gut fullness signals is what can often lead to overeating. And then finally, I'm going to take you through step by step, really practical stages in helping you to tune into what your gut's telling you about fullness to help you stop eating when you intend to. But in addition, what I'm going to do is explain how, if you're having trouble listening to your fullness signals, I'm going to show you how you can use an alternative to tuning in to recalibrate your eating so that you can stop overeating nevertheless. Fullness evolved to help us regulate how much we eat. As we get increasingly full, the signals help to dial down our appetite and our desire to keep eating. And this happens through this communication between the gut and the brain. It's a two-way process relying on nerve signals and hormonal signals. Fullness signals nudge us towards stopping eating, but it's easy to override those signals and keep eating once we've started. I'm going to describe how these signals work, which will make it much easier for you to stop when you intended to. So the first set of fullness signals is the signals coming from the stomach. What's helpful to know about these is that the stomach is a muscular pouch, and the wall of the stomach has nerve receptors in it called mechanoreceptors. And as food enters the stomach lining expands with the volume of food, and the mechanoreceptors in the stomach wall send nerve signals to the brain about how much food is being received. The fact that these signals are transmitted by nerves means they're super quick, so they actually are registered more or less mouthful by mouthful as you're eating. The other thing to say about the stomach fullness signals is they're easier to tune into if you're actually hungry when you start eating, just because it's easier to notice going from hungry to not so hungry to full than it is if you start at somewhat full, then you're going to be less able to notice the difference. The second type of fullness signals is those that go from the part of the gut that is after the stomach and sends information to the brain. So this is a different type of information. This is once the gut is breaking down the food that you've eaten and the gut is absorbing energy and nutrients from that food, it sends signals to the brain via hormones in the bloodstream about the breakdown of what you've eaten. So this is much slower. It starts later anyway because the food hasn't arrived in the gut so quickly as in the stomach. And also it takes a while for the food to be broken down and for the brain to register all of those signals. Now, this is where the 20 to 30 minute signalling comes in, because it can take 20 to 30 minutes or even longer to really register how full you are. You've probably experienced this if you've had a celebratory meal that's really substantial and you've kept eating, then you can feel much, much fuller an hour later after you've finished eating than you did when you stopped. And that's because you're now getting the full impact, if you like, of those gut fullness signals. So the problem is that we can eat an awful lot in the time that it takes for those gut fullness signals to reach the brain, which is why it's much more helpful for us to use those earlier stomach fullness signals. And I'll be showing you exactly how to do that in a moment. Okay, so practically, how can you use this information to guide your own eating and stop when you intended to? Well, my suggestion is to use the appetite pendulum to gauge how your hunger and fullness levels are changing as you eat. So I can't tell you what fullness feels like because it's subjective, and that's absolutely fine. You don't need to know how fullness feels to anyone else. You just need to learn how it feels to you in order for it to be useful to you. The chances are that if you are hungry when you start eating, the first thing you might notice is just feeling a bit less hungry as you eat successive mouthfuls. Then you might start noticing feeling slightly full and then getting to the point of just full. As you're eating, they're likely to be quite quick because remember that they are to do with, as food arrives in the stomach wall stretching. So this is happening fairly quickly. The next thing to do is to notice how much food you actually ate. So gauge the quantity of food that got you to that point. So you're now beginning to make the connection between the volume of food and the degree of stomach fullness. Remember, this is a learning process, and if you want my professional help with this, click the link in the description. How long it's going to take you to get hungry again after this meal will depend on the composition of the food. So more protein and fibre is going to keep you fuller for longer than if the meal was made up mainly of simple carbohydrates. But here's a useful tip. that because the same volume of food takes different amounts of time to digest depending on its composition, you can start to get used to how long it takes different types of meals to digest. So how soon you get hungry after different types of meals, and you can use that in planning your day. If you know there's going to be a very short time between successive meals, then you might want something less sustaining. But if you know you're going to have a long gap, then having something with more protein and fibre and fat is going to be helpful in keeping you going. Okay, so what can you do if you're really struggling to tune into feelings of fullness? Well, here's my suggestion. At your next meal, eat what you normally eat. Eat the amount that you normally eat. And when you get to the end of that meal, just notice how you're feeling physically. You don't have to call it fullness. Just notice what it feels like in your body right now and call that overall feeling just full. Then on your subsequent meal, the next meal that you have, reduce the size of the meal. We're going to start recalibrating the amount you eat. But rather than by tuning into fullness, we're going to do it by adjusting the size and then tuning into fullness. So you might want to reduce the size of the next meal by a few spoonfuls, or maybe if you want to make a significant difference, you could reduce the size of the meal by a quarter, so that it's now only 3/4 of the amount that you would normally have. So at your next meal, you eat that 3/4 size meal, and at the end of that meal, just notice what you feel like physically and call that just full. So this is the start of recalibrating. Again, it's a learning process, so it's something that you can learn to do over time. And once you are eating a meal that is 3/4 the usual size, you might feel uncomfortable, it might feel a bit weird, but that's okay. And if you keep repeating the same thing, that at each successive meal, you are serving yourself 3/4 of the original amount, so you don't keep reducing it, you're now consistently eating 3/4 of what you used to eat, or a few spoonfuls less, it doesn't have to be a quarter less, then do the same thing. Just start to notice what it feels like in your body at the end of that 3/4 size. And how long do you do this for? Well, you keep doing this until this new meal size feels totally normal, like second nature. So the aim is to get this as a regular habit, something that's happening day in, day out. And the beauty of that is that whatever weight you lose by reducing your meal size regularly will stay off. The amount of weight will stay off because this is now a regular new pattern. And the other thing I would say is, however you make the change, whether it's by tuning into the fullness signals using the appetite pendulum, or whether it's reducing down the meal size by a quarter, whichever route you take, don't worry if the weight doesn't come off immediately, because sometimes there's a lag between making a change to your eating habits and that change showing up on the scales. The main thing is just to be consistent about the new eating habit. In this case, your new portion size, your new meal size. And if you slip up at one meal, don't worry. If you eat more than you intended, don't worry at all. Just put it down to experience and get back on track at your next meal. Please like, subscribe and share this video. In my next video, I'm going to be talking about helpful hunger, the other side of the appetite pendulum, and how being able to understand hunger and how it works can help you to stop eating when you're not hungry. It can help you really avoid non-hungry eating.
What other key learnings did you pick up that you would like some of our viewers to also know and maybe be aware of a little earlier on in the journey?
Well, I mean, I'd say the first thing is crunch your mission statement. You know, you've got to know what it is that you're selling. And for years, people would say, so what do you offer? What do you do? And we'd sort of go, oh, well, we it's lovely food and it's really beautiful and you can sleep so well. And it's like, no. In 4 words, what is your mission statement? What is your mission? What are you doing? What are you providing? So now we've got it. We provide the environment for self-love.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
I love it. And it says it all.
Absolutely. And that's it. We provide the environment for self-love to occur. So that's it.
And that's beautiful because then people know, you're right, people know exactly what they're getting and everything else falls within that particular mission statement. And that's absolutely lovely. So sticking with that, with the mission statement, with having to put the marketing out there, having to go on socials, websites, and we were talking about this at the start of the show. What do you wish people had or hadn't said to you in terms of being supportive or less supportive or thinking they're being supportive?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, for us personally, we were out in the middle of nowhere. So we didn't really have any family or anybody around. We'd moved to a new country and it was just us and the ancient olive farmer neighbours who used to watch us practice yoga and sort of he was very funny. Antonio, he used to say, in his Spanish, used to say, "You're charging money for that? I can do that. Anyone can do that. Tell them to pay me. I want to give up olive farming." Anyway, that's by the by. But yeah, so in answer to your question, we didn't really have anybody telling us anything because we went into this kind of zone of just literally the two of us for the first 2 years. But I think I do remember my mother and my sisters, bless them, saying, you've got to calm down because you are so manically intense. You're working too hard. Slow down. You're growing too fast. Sometimes in life you work so hard at something and nothing happens and you think, God, this is not working. And then with the yoga, it was like we asked and the universe provided. And we grew, like you were saying before, we grew too fast. And everyone was saying, slow down. We'd say, yes, come, but the infrastructure wasn't there, So we'd be driving to the airport and then I'd have to cook the meal in the afternoon. I was also breastfeeding. It was manic. So yes, people told me, they did warn me, my family, and I just didn't listen.
And looking back, do you think they were right?
I do think they were right. They were so right because they could see that and I was supposed to be this yoga goddess and I'd had 2 hours sleep and I'd been breastfeeding a baby and I was sort of, scared because we had another 10 people arriving and we were working for 7 days.
Sounds overwhelming.
Overwhelmed. That is exactly the word. I'd say, be kind to yourself. Be realistic and trust that if it's going to work, it's going to work, and everything will come. But your cake lady and soap lady, I totally hear that. You've got to little bit by little bit grow the business slowly.
Yes. And sort of related to that, you're talking about you breastfeeding at the time. You have children. Yeah. What would you say to people who maybe are a little bit naysayers on new mums running their business? Oh, you can't possibly do that at the same time as having children and that sort of... Because that does happen. And people do really need to keep their opinions to themselves if it's not solicited.
The thing about my life, Audrey, is that I spent my 20s just fannying around. I know that's not the right thing to say, but really, I was just sort of dithering about for
or just loving life,
or maybe loving life.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's very much a nice way of putting it. And then suddenly, I decided, right, yoga, and everything came at once. Jonathan, yoga, the business, the baby, the second baby. It all just. So I'd say, whatever the universe gives you, just go with it. There is no right or wrong way. If you're fortunate enough to get pregnant, enjoy the ride. But it's tough. But I'd say, as before, God, get help.
Yes, absolutely. It is about reaching out and reaching out perhaps to, when I say the right people, sometimes you may reach out and the wrong hand reaches back, or someone who's not helpful. And it is about knowing your boundaries, knowing your limits, and knowing what you aren't prepared to tolerate, and needing to fail fast and move on to the next
Yes.
piece of help sometimes. It's, it's one of those things. But related to that, when things did get overwhelming, when things got tough, when everyone's saying, take a step back, what kept you going?
I think, firstly, I'd say my practice. I just, if it wasn't for, and my practice then was just literally just probably mostly meditating and just taking time out, even if it was 10 minutes to just be and every day I had that discipline, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening. And that's what kind of saved me was meditation, really, and forcing myself to just sort of go, no, I'm going to take myself away, because if you can't feed yourself energetically, then you are no good to anyone else.
Yes.
So you have to take that space in, and also for what I was doing, if I didn't have that practice, if I didn't do some yoga, I would have been seen as a real fraud. So and imposter syndrome is also something that all of us women, I think, especially, having to sort of appear this perfect being, and I mean, I think what's wonderful about the world now is that we are becoming more authentic. As social media becomes more prevalent, I think people are also, that's the other side of the coin, and that's what's so wonderful about this show.
It is about getting to the authentic self. It's about saying it's not all picture perfect, and life isn't like that, but it is about learning from people like yourself to roll with the punches sometimes, and sometimes you have to really somersault to go through those things. Yeah. I mean, what would you say to somebody who has reached out for help, they maybe haven't had the help they wanted or needed, and they are also struggling to take that step back, because there is a discipline. You said the word discipline. We do have to be quite strict with ourselves. How might you support somebody who's kind of there, is trying to do the right things, but is somehow reaching out to the wrong places?
I'd say go back to the drawing board. Go back to the mission statement, and go back to the core of why you started to do this in the first place. Because sometimes, I don't know who it was who said, but somebody said, don't make what you love what you do, because it's it's tough. So I'd say go back and remember what it was that started you on this journey, and what you loved, and take the core of that, and get rid of all the stuff that isn't necessary, that doesn't say. We were offering way too much in the beginning, overwhelming ourselves, overwhelming the clients. Keep it simple. You do one thing well. Yes. So do that one thing well.
Yes. That is beautiful. That's really important, and sometimes it's about just starting with that one thing as well, rather than having so much. It's on the menu. It's the same thing if you were a chef. If you were trying to cook a 3-course menu every single time and giving people that much choice, it can be very difficult, and the quality will be compromised.
Definitely.
So I love your story. I know you went to a new country where you didn't speak the language, you didn't know it, and just went for it. That's absolutely incredible.
It is so brave.
Yes, so brave.
I learned something called fontanera Spanish, which means plumber Spanish, and that was so my plumber makes me sound very grand. Our plumber used to shout at me, "Mujer!" and he shouted me into submission. I was so scared that I was too scared not to learn Spanish. So that's how
fabulous. I mean, that is an incredible adventure. So if somebody is maybe teaching yoga now and they think, well, actually I do want to do something, but I don't know whether I'm ready for a retreat just yet, but I do want to do something that's mine.
Yes.
What could that mine be?
So I guess, you could start with something like a day retreat. You could do, that's what we were thinking of doing. We didn't end up doing it. We ended up opening retreats in all over Europe, but in England, I would say, sadly no more. The pandemic.
Pandemic.
Such a shame. But anyway, I'd say if you're not ready to do a full sort of 6-day residential retreat, then do day retreats. If you've got something to give, you know, whether it's your yoga or nutrition or you know, something to teach people or life coaching, or do something from your home. You know, there's no reason why you can't invite, you know, your friends round as your guinea pigs, your friends and family, and that's when you do your marketing with your friends and family around. Yes. And then you grow the business from there, and then maybe you'll feel confident enough to rent a place, and then maybe get some accommodation going, or
a garden pod. They're quite, you know, they can be beautiful,
exactly,
can't they?
True, and not hugely going to break the bank if you invest in one, and it can be used for something else.
Yes,
that's a really good point. You could do something in your garden. Why not?
Absolutely love this. Rosie is going to stay with us, and she's going to give us her top tips for entrepreneurs. But before that, I had the opportunity to go to a local new shop that's opened, and it's part of the Lewis Foundation. The Lewis Foundation is a local charity to Northamptonshire. They give gift bags to people undergoing cancer treatment in hospital, and they serve the local area around the Midlands. But they've recently, to remain sustainable, opened a shop as well. And what they do is they work with businesses who give them some of the excess products, and they're able to sell them in the shop. So I caught up with Lorraine to find out a little bit more.
So we opened last Friday, and our shop is in the Grosvenor Shopping Centre in Northampton. And what we do is we work with local businesses who donate us their end of line or surplus stock, and then this goes back into our shop, sold to the public, which raises money for the Lewis Foundation. For some reason, when you go in, even in normal charity shops, there doesn't seem to be many men's products. So one of our focuses is that we would include that, because we do get men come in and say, oh, actually there's some products for me. They're actually quite surprised. So we try to cater for everybody. So we've got a mixture of toiletries, clothing, stationery, toys, simply anything that businesses donate, all brand new. And that's what was really important for us, to support sustainability by working with businesses. So the pop-up shop is really focused on working with businesses to be sustainable. It's something that was really important to us to embed within the work we do. And we like it that businesses have all these items on their hands that they have no purpose for. But if they can give it to a charity who can repurpose it and sell it to the public to make money and do good, then it's a win-win for everybody all round. Get in touch. The best way is via email, hello@thelewisfoundation.co.uk. And if you're not sure if it's something that we can take, please still get in touch anyway, because we can let you know whether it's suitable or not.
This is Giovanna Tartaron, your host of Spark and Change with Gigi, empowering personal and global transformation. Join me every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the Fresh Takes Network, right here live at E360 TV.
My top tips for starting, well, I can only speak for a yoga and wellness business, because that's the business that I've been in for 22 years. But I guess, as I was saying before, the first thing would be to crunch your mission statement. What is it that you offer? Make sure you know exactly what it is you're offering, and that you can describe it in less than a sentence, a phrase, even 4 or 5 words, so that when the press come and do interviews, you can really nail your mission statement, and you can really impress them with the essence of what you do. The second thing I'd say would be to research your market, find out what everybody in your industry, or in yoga and wellness in my case, is doing. Like, we went and saw all we didn't go and visit them, but we went and sort of kind of surreptitiously checked out all the local competition. There was hardly any 22 years ago, actually. It was mostly just us and a couple of others. But I think I'd say nail your USPs, you know, your unique selling points. What is it that makes you different to all the other businesses in your field? What is it that you do uniquely, that comes from you and is driven by passion, and is something that nobody else is offering? In our case, we were a home from home, and we still are a home from home retreat. It's our personal home, and we welcome people as if they're family. So it's very, very much a homely vibe, so that's quite unique. Most of the other
retreats around are a little bit more formal. So yeah, we like to keep it really relaxed, warm but professional. I think that was it. Yeah. So the third thing I'd say is, this is really important, is work on your business and not in your business. So get out of your business as soon as you can. In my case, I was a micromanager. I micromanaged everything, you know, the chefs, the drivers, the yoga teachers, because I wanted to be all over everything. And I kind of burnt out because I was working too much in the business. And you know, as a director, you're floating above. So I think the most important thing is to find the right people. Finding a good manager, oh my goodness, that's like gold dust. When you find the right manager, then you're away. And you trust that they can look after the team, and you don't need to micromanage them if you've picked the right manager. We've got a great manager, and she just says, Rosie, butt out. I'm all over this, you know. So yeah, so that's what I'd say. Thirdly, I'd say keep it simple. Do one thing well. Don't try and be all things to everybody. Find out, a bit like your mission statement, offer one thing well. In the yoga and wellness industry, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now. And I used to get very insecure. I used to look and see, oh my goodness, so-and-so is offering yoga and shaking, yoga and quaking, yoga and tapping, yoga and Peloton, oh, yoga and, you know, dancing. Oh, you know, what are we doing? We're just doing one thing. And then a journalist said to me, a wonderful journalist from Conde Nast, she said to me, Rosie and Jonathan, what you do is you help people to fall in love with themselves. You are all about self-acceptance, and you do that really well. You don't have to buy bicycles or, you know, have different props. Just let the business extend from who you are, because you are the foundation of the business. And if what you're providing comes from the heart and you're passionate about it, then it will flow out, and it'll work.
For today's Business Boost, I thought I would talk about manifesting. Because a lot of the time when we're starting a new business, we hear a lot about law of attraction. Now, our wonderful guest talks about trusting in the universe, and there is something about letting things happen as they will. But I think it can get diluted and confused with a lot of what law of attraction seems to say. And I don't necessarily mean spiritual practitioners. I mean the people who say they're law of attraction gurus and then charge you a lot of money to go to one of their seminars, and then please be aware of those. They will tell you things like, if you write something down 25 times a day, or if you just put it out there in the universe, everything will come. A lot of the more reputable law of attraction practitioners will say, well, action forms part of attraction. And certainly as a coach and in psychology, there's a lot to be said for making vision boards and knowing what your goal is and being aware of what it is you're looking for. However, just putting it out there is not enough. You do have to then take steps to actually do something. So I thought I would give you a tip from business, and that is to set yourself SMART goals. SMART is an acronym that we use a lot, and it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So your goal has to be specific, and very much like our guest has said, if you know what it is you're offering, you know what it is your business is about, you can be very specific. So what is it you are trying to achieve? Are you looking for a premises to hire? Are you going to get your website finished? Are you going to get 3 clients that month? Be specific with what it is. So that's the S. Then measurable. Again, when you're specific, it is usually measurable. So when I say I'm going to get 3 clients this month, that is measurable. If you're going to say, I'm going to get some clients this month, that is not measurable, because what does some actually mean? So when we say measurable, it's important to put a number onto there. The next bit, A, is probably the most important of all. It has to be achievable. If you have just started out, nobody knows who you are, how are you possibly going to get perhaps 3 clients that month if no one knows you even exist as a business? It has to be an achievable goal. So you know you the best. And similarly, if you have other commitments, if you have other things that you need to be doing, if you have another stream of income that you have to work for, then aiming too high or overwhelming yourself in terms of what goal you're trying to achieve is not going to be helpful, and it's also not going to happen. So make sure it's achievable. Realistic. Be realistic for you as well. They're kind of linked, the achievability and being realistic, but this is about really understanding who you are. If you are somebody who is happy to work all the way through the night and you have no other commitments and it is possible to do it, great, okay. Maybe you can put in that many hours work in order to get your clients, or in order to get those premises, or in order to get that website done by that particular deadline. But if that's not you, or maybe you don't even have those skills, then how realistic is it? Because the last thing you want to do when you're setting a goal is set yourself up to fail. The final thing, the T, stands for timely or time dependent. You have to say by when. So that's where I gave the example of I will get 3 clients by the end of this month. You need to have a time where you can check back. Because if you're just saying, oh, I'm going to have some clients, or I might have some people come through my doors, you're actually never going to know that you've achieved it. So you need to set a time so you can stop and take stock and think about it and say, well, actually that worked or that didn't. And then you can reflect on that particular goal by reflecting on, well, was it specific enough? Was it measurable? Was it achievable? Was it realistic? So set yourself a time to check back. So in summary, when it comes to law of attraction, there's nothing wrong with having vision boards. There's nothing wrong with putting what you wish out there, because actually that can help you clarify what it is you're looking for. But it's also helpful to set an intention to take some action as well. I just love chatting with Rosie.
She's amazing. I feel so energised, and also, you know, some of the things that she was saying really resonated, and probably with you. We both run our own business, very different, but we have done it. So, yeah, and I just think actually, yeah, I where I started, where I am now, it's a lot, and you don't often look back and appreciate what you've done.
And I think that's probably a great place to start. Sometimes we do actually need to stop and take stock and go, yeah, do you know what, I did this, and be proud of it for a bit, because actually it's like what Rosie was saying, that she was working so hard to prove something to someone and she didn't know who it was. I think we can get consumed by that as well, that
Definitely.
We are almost, you've got to ask yourself, well, who am I doing this for? And the answer has got to be you or your business, not this other validation that we may not ever get.
No, and sometimes, you know, we've spoken about this, don't know where that comes from. We know, what is that drive? Where does it come from? And if it's not for the right reasons, you have to bring it back to yourself and the goal, the small goal, you know, the small reason why you're doing it, bring everything back down to basic.
Yes, I think that's what resonated with me the most as well. It is always knowing what that USP is. What is it you are offering?
Yes.
Because if you don't know that, then it's almost too easy to go off in different directions and go, oh, I think I should do this. And I know that's something I struggle with myself, and our producer is brilliant at kind of getting me back into, focus on this, that's what you do.
Everyone needs a Sarah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then just as a last point here with regards to the business, and I think this helps when it comes to money, and it helps when it comes to valuing yourself for what you do, is to have the 2 separate bank accounts. Now, even if you're not a limited, if you are a limited company, you're going to have 2 separate bank accounts anyway. But even if it's a side hustle, it's still a business, and it is much better to not get finances wrapped up with your personal stuff as
Yeah.
well. And in a way, having that separation can really make a difference, because then you can look at both accounts and go, oh, right, hang on a minute, what's happening in my business account?
Exactly. Or equally, oh yeah, that's what I'm worth. That's what I've done.
Yes.
Actually, on that point, it was impossible to get a new bank account in lockdown.
Oh.
So many banks just weren't doing them, so we had to continue just using our personal bank and trying to keep it separate, and it was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, it's hard for
Yeah.
accounting, and that's
Yeah.
something that we have to look at. And sadly, though, that is all we have time for. But again, if you have any topics you'd like us to cover, it will be an absolute pleasure to discuss. And we have so many amazing guests that will come in
We really do.
and talk about them. So thank you for joining us today. Stay well, stay healthy.